Every morning in nearly every country around the world, millions of people wake up and do the exact same thing. They open their eyes, they stretch. Maybe they sit up in bed, and then, without thinking, they begin their routine. For most people over the age of 40, that routine includes something they genuinely believe is good for them, something they were taught, something their parents did. Something that feels so natural, so harmless, so obviously healthy, that questioning it would almost seem absurd. But here is what I have learned after decades of practicing cardiology. That one thing you do every morning without fail, it may be putting you at risk. Not tomorrow, not 10 years from now, but today. I am Dr. Narges, and this is a cardiologist alert that millions of seniors are risking their health every single morning without realizing it. Let me pause here for a moment because I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking this sounds like another dramatic health warning, another video telling you that everything you do is wrong, another reason to feel anxious about things you cannot control. That is not what this is. I do not create fear-based content. I do not believe in alarming people without giving them clarity, and I certainly do not believe in making you feel helpless about your own body. What I do believe in is this. There are hidden patterns in our daily lives that most of us never connect to our long-term health. Not because we are careless, but because no one ever explained them to us in a way that made sense. And the morning? The morning is when some of the most important hidden patterns live. Think about your own morning for a moment. Not the idealized version you see in commercials. Not the perfectly lit Instagram routine with lemon water and journaling. Your actual morning. The real one. What is the first thing you do after you turn off the alarm? Do you sit up quickly? Do you check your phone? Do you head straight to the bathroom? Do you take your medications? Do you drink something hot or cold? Do you stretch? Do you rush? Now here is the question I want you to hold in your mind for the rest of this video. What if one of those automatic, unthinking, perfectly normal morning actions was quietly working against your heart every single day? What if the very thing you do to feel healthy in the morning was actually creating a cascade of effects inside your body that you cannot see, cannot feel, and would never suspect? And what if understanding this one pattern could change not just how you feel today, but how well you age over the next 10, 20, or 30 years? I am going to show you something that most people never realize until something goes wrong. Something that cardiologists see in the hospital every week, but rarely have time to explain in a 15-minute appointment. This is not about rare conditions. This is not about genetic bad luck. This is about the physiology of waking up, the biology of transition, the hidden stress that your body experiences every single morning, and how the choices you make in those first minutes can either protect you or push you toward trouble. By the end of this video, you will understand something that most people never learn until they are lying in a hospital bed. You will see your morning differently, not with fear, with clarity, with awareness, with the kind of quiet understanding that allows you to make better choices without anxiety. But before I explain the mechanism, before I show you what is actually happening inside your body when you wake up, I need to tell you about a patient. Not because her story is dramatic, but because her story is ordinary. And that is exactly what makes it so important. She was 62 years old, active, healthy weight, no major medical problems that she knew of. She walked every day. She ate reasonably well. She took a few vitamins in the morning. She did not smoke. She drank very little alcohol. By every standard measure, she was doing everything right. And yet, one morning, she did what she always did. She woke up. She sat up quickly because she had things to do. She took her vitamins with a glass of cold water, and then she stood up to start her day. Within minutes, she felt something she had never felt before. Not pain exactly, more like pressure, more like something was wrong deep in her chest, more like her body was trying to tell her to stop. She sat back down, she waited. The feeling passed. So she got up again and continued her morning. 3 hours later, she was in the emergency department, and I was looking at her EKG, trying to understand how someone who seemed so healthy could be having a heart attack. The answer was not in her cholesterol. It was not in her lifestyle. It was not in her genetics. The answer was in her morning. And once I explain what happened, you will never think about your own morning the same way again. But before I do that, let me be very clear about something. The goal here is not to make you afraid of waking up. The goal is to help you understand something your body has been trying to tell you for years, something most of us have been trained to ignore. Because here is the truth. Your body does not transition from sleep to wakefulness the way a light switches on. It is not instantaneous. It is not simple. And it is certainly not something you should rush. What happens in those first few minutes after waking is one of the most complex physiological events of your entire day. Your blood pressure changes. Your heart rate changes. Your blood vessels change. Your hormones change. Your nervous system flips from one mode to another. And if you do not understand what is happening, if you rush through it, if you add certain common morning habits on top of it, you can accidentally create a perfect storm inside your body. A storm that most people never see coming. A storm that millions of seniors walk into every single morning without realizing it. So let me ask you again, what is the first thing you do when you wake up? Because the answer to that question matters more than you think. And by the time we finish this video, you are going to understand exactly why. Before I explain what happened inside that patient's body, I need to address something that might surprise you. Most people believe that the most dangerous time for their heart is during exercise, or during stress, or after a heavy meal. And those things can certainly be triggers. But here is what the medical literature has shown us for decades, and what most people never hear about. The most common time for a heart attack is not during a run. It is not during an argument. It is not late at night when you are resting. It is in the morning, specifically in the first few hours after waking up. Studies have consistently shown that the risk of heart attack is highest between 6 in the morning and noon. In fact, research suggests that you are roughly 40% more likely to have a heart attack in these morning hours compared to any other time of day. Think about that number for a moment. 40%. That is not a small statistical fluctuation. That is not a coincidence. That is a biological pattern so strong and so consistent that cardiologists have known about it for years. And yet, most people over the age of 40 have never heard this explained in a way that actually helps them understand why it happens or what they can do about it. So let me explain why. And let me start with something that might seem completely unrelated. Your body has an internal clock. You have heard of the circadian rhythm, but most people think of it only in terms of sleep and wakefulness. When you feel tired, when you feel alert, that is part of it, but it is so much more than that. Your circadian rhythm controls nearly every system in your body. Your hormone release, your body temperature, your metabolism, your blood pressure, your heart rate, even the way your blood clots. And here is where the morning becomes critical. While you are sleeping, your body is in a very different state than when you are awake. Your heart rate is slower. Your blood pressure is lower. Your nervous system is in what we call a parasympathetic state. Rest and digest, calm, recovery. But as morning approaches, your body begins to prepare for wakefulness. This is not something you control. It is automatic. It is ancient. It is your body getting ready to meet the demands of the day. Your adrenal glands start releasing cortisol. This is your natural wake-up hormone. It increases your blood sugar. It sharpens your alertness. It prepares you to face whatever the day brings. Your blood pressure begins to rise. In fact, in many people, blood pressure surges quite dramatically in the early morning hours. This is called the morning blood pressure surge, and it is completely normal. Your body needs higher blood pressure to pump more blood to your muscles and your brain when you are upright and moving. Your heart rate increases. Your blood becomes slightly thicker and more prone to clotting. Your blood vessels become a bit stiffer and less flexible. All of this happens naturally, automatically, without you doing anything at all. Now here is the overlooked problem. The thing most people never realize. Your body is designed to go through this transition gradually, over time, with a gentle wave-like increase in these physiological processes. But most of us do not allow that to happen. Instead, we wake up and immediately demand that our bodies perform at full capacity. We sit up quickly. We stand up quickly. We rush to the bathroom. We check our phones and immediately flood our brains with stress-inducing information. We drink cold water that constricts our blood vessels. We take medications that further alter our blood pressure. We drink coffee that raises our heart rate even more. We eat breakfast while standing at the counter. We run out the door. And in doing so, we stack stressors on top of an already vulnerable transition. This is the hidden mechanism that most people miss. It is not that any one of these morning habits is dangerous on its own. It is that they combine with your body's natural morning physiology to create something far greater than the sum of its parts. Let me give you a concrete example of what I mean. Imagine your blood pressure in the middle of the night is around 110/70, perfectly normal. Then, as morning approaches, your body begins its natural preparation. By the time you wake up, your blood pressure might have risen to 125/80, still normal, still within a healthy range. Now you sit up quickly. That alone can cause a temporary drop in blood pressure, followed by a compensatory surge. Your body overcorrects. Now you are at 135/85. Then you stand up. Another surge. Now you are at 140/90. Then you drink a cold glass of water. Cold liquid causes your blood vessels to constrict. Your blood pressure rises further. Now you are at 145/95. Then you take your medication. Depending on what you are taking, this could go either way. But many people take medications in the morning that affect their heart rate or blood pressure without considering how they interact with this natural surge. Then you have your coffee. Caffeine is a vasoconstrictor. It narrows your blood vessels and increases your heart rate. Now you might be at 150/100, and suddenly, without any single habit being dangerous on its own, you have stacked enough small stressors on top of each other that your cardiovascular system is now under significant strain, all within the first 30 minutes of waking up. Now imagine you already have high blood pressure, or you have plaque in your arteries, or you have a stiff aorta, or you have diabetes, or you are over the age of 60. The same stacking effect happens, but the consequences can be far more serious. This is why millions of seniors risk their health every morning without realizing it. Not because they are doing one terrible thing, but because they are doing many small things at exactly the wrong time, in exactly the wrong combination, on top of a body that is already going through a major physiological transition. And here is what makes this problem so overlooked. Most doctors do not have time to explain this in a routine appointment. They check your blood pressure in the office, usually in the middle of the day, when your body is already fully awake and adapted. They ask if you exercise and if you eat vegetables and if you smoke. They prescribe medications based on averages and guidelines. But no one sits down with you and maps out your morning. No one asks, what exactly do you do in the first hour after waking up? And no one explains how those seemingly healthy choices might be combining in ways that actually harm you. So people continue doing what they have always done. They continue believing that their morning routine is fine because nothing bad has happened yet. They continue adding small stressors on top of small stressors, day after day after day, completely unaware that their body is sending them signals that they have learned to ignore. That patient I mentioned earlier, the 62-year-old woman who was doing everything right, she had no idea that her morning routine was contributing to her heart attack. She thought she was being healthy. She thought she was taking care of herself, and in many ways, she was. But she was also rushing through the most vulnerable transition of her entire day. And one morning, her body simply could not keep up. So here is what I want you to understand before we go any further. This is not about eliminating everything from your morning. It is not about living in fear of your alarm clock. It is about awareness. It is about understanding what your body is doing while you are half asleep and rushing to start your day. Because once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. And once you understand the mechanism, You can work with your body instead of against it. In the next part, I am going to walk you through exactly what happens inside the body during those critical first minutes after waking. Not in abstract terms, not in medical jargon, but in the kind of clear, step-by-step explanation that I wish every patient could hear before something goes wrong. Because the truth is, your body is not trying to trick you. It is not trying to fail you. It is simply trying to do its job. And with a little understanding, you can help it do that job safely, calmly, and effectively for decades to come. Let me tell you about a morning that changed everything for one of my patients. Not because it was dramatic or sudden, but because it was so painfully ordinary that it could have been any of us. His name was Richard. He was 68 years old when I first met him in the hospital. Retired teacher, grandfather of 4, lived in a small town where everyone knew his name. He had the kind of face that looked like it had spent decades smiling at students in a classroom. Richard came to see me not because he felt sick, but because his wife insisted. She had noticed something, a pattern. Nothing dramatic, nothing he would have mentioned on his own, but she saw it, and she worried. Every morning, Richard would wake up around 6:30. He would sit up quickly because he had always been a morning person. He would swing his legs over the side of the bed, stand up immediately, and walk to the bathroom. Then he would take his blood pressure medication, drink a glass of cold water, and make a pot of coffee. Within 20 minutes of waking, he would be standing in his kitchen, coffee in hand, reading the news on his phone. And almost every morning, about 30 minutes after waking, he would feel something strange. Not pain, not dizziness, something harder to describe. A heaviness in his chest, a sense that his heart was working too hard, a feeling that passed after a few minutes and then disappeared completely. He had been feeling this for months, almost every single day, and he had never mentioned it to anyone because he assumed it was nothing. He assumed it was just getting older. He assumed that if it were serious, it would hurt more, or last longer, or come with some obvious sign that something was wrong. This is one of the most important things I have learned in my career. The human body is remarkably good at adapting to slow changes. It is remarkably good at normalizing things that should not be normal. And it is remarkably good at convincing us that subtle warning signs are just part of life. Richard did not come to see me because of the chest heaviness. He came because his wife made an appointment after she heard him gasp slightly one morning when he stood up too fast. Just a small sound, just a quick intake of breath. But she had been watching him for months, and something in her gut told her that this was not nothing. When I reviewed his medical history, nothing stood out. His blood pressure was well controlled on his medication. His cholesterol was acceptable. He did not have diabetes. He had never smoked. He walked 2 miles every afternoon. By every conventional measure, Richard was doing fine. But when I asked him to describe his morning in detail, when I walked through every single action from the moment his alarm went off to the moment he left the house, I started to see the problem. Richard was rushing, not because he was late, not because he had somewhere urgent to be. He was rushing because he had always rushed, because his father had rushed, because rushing in the morning felt productive and efficient and normal, and his body was paying the price every single day. Let me explain what was happening to Richard, because his case illustrates a pattern I have seen hundreds of times, in hundreds of patients, across decades of practice. Richard had something called masked hypertension. This means his blood pressure looked normal when we measured it in the office, usually in the middle of the day, but was actually spiking dangerously high during specific times, particularly in the morning. The morning blood pressure surge that I mentioned earlier was hitting Richard much harder than it should have, and his morning habits were making it worse. When Richard sat up quickly, his blood pressure dropped for a moment as blood pooled in his legs. This is called orthostatic hypotension. Then his body overcorrected, releasing a flood of stress hormones to pump blood back to his brain. That overcorrection caused a spike in blood pressure that could last for 30 minutes or more. When he stood up immediately, before giving his body time to adjust, he added another surge on top of the first one. When he drank cold water, his blood vessels constricted, raising his blood pressure further. When he took his blood pressure medication, the timing was working against him. His medication was designed to last 24 hours, but by morning, its effect was wearing off just as his natural morning surge was peaking. This created a window of vulnerability every single day. And when he drank coffee within the first hour, the caffeine added yet another layer of vascular constriction and heart rate increase. By the time Richard had been awake for 30 minutes, his blood pressure was spiking to levels that would have alarmed any cardiologist. 170 over 100, sometimes higher. And then it would slowly come back down as his body adjusted and his medication kicked in. He was experiencing a dangerous blood pressure surge every single morning for months. And he had no idea because the only time we ever checked his blood pressure was in the afternoon, when everything looked perfectly normal. This is the real-world pattern that most people never see. It is not about dramatic events. It is about small, repeated daily stresses that accumulate over time. It is about a body that is working hard to protect you while you accidentally make its job harder. Now here is what happened with Richard after we figured this out. I asked him to make 3 small changes to his morning. Nothing drastic. Nothing that required special equipment or expensive supplements or dramatic lifestyle overhauls. First, I asked him to stop rushing, to sit up slowly, to sit on the edge of the bed for 2 full minutes before standing, to give his body time to adjust to the change in position. Second, I asked him to change the timing of his medication, to take it at night instead of in the morning, so that it would be at full strength during the morning surge rather than wearing off. Third, I asked him to delay his coffee by at least 1 hour, to drink a glass of room temperature water first, slowly, and to eat something small before having caffeine. Within 1 week, Richard's morning chest heaviness disappeared completely. Within 1 month, his ambulatory blood pressure monitoring showed that his morning surges had dropped by more than 30 points. Within 6 months, he had forgotten what that strange feeling in his chest even felt like. No new medications, no surgeries, no dramatic interventions. Just a better understanding of what his body was doing every morning, and a few simple adjustments to work with his physiology instead of against it. This is the power of understanding hidden health patterns. Not because they are mysterious or complicated, but because they are hidden in plain sight. Right there in your morning routine. Right there in the things you do without thinking. Richard was lucky. His wife noticed something was wrong. He came in before a heart attack or a stroke occurred. Many people are not so fortunate. I have seen patients in the emergency department on a Sunday morning who had no idea they were at risk, who had no warning signs, who simply woke up, rushed through their morning routine, and collapsed in the bathroom or the kitchen or the driveway. And when I ask their families what they did every morning, the answer is almost always the same. The same patterns, the same rushing, the same cold water, the same coffee, the same medication timing, the same assumption that because nothing bad had happened yet, nothing bad would ever happen. But your body does not warn you with dramatic signs. It warns you with subtle signals that most of us have been trained to ignore. A little heaviness here, a little shortness of breath there, a little dizziness when you stand up. A little fatigue in the early morning hours. Small things, easy to dismiss, easy to explain away as normal aging or lack of sleep or just having a busy life. And here is the truth that I want every person watching this video to understand. Your body is not being subtle to trick you. It is being subtle because it is trying to communicate with you in the only way it knows how. It is sending you messages every single morning. The question is not whether your body is speaking. The question is whether you are listening. In the next part, I am going to take you inside the body to show you exactly what is happening during those first critical minutes after waking. I am going to explain the mechanism in a way that makes sense, not with complicated medical terminology, but with clear, step-by-step understanding that you can use starting tomorrow morning. Because once you see what is actually happening inside your arteries, your heart, and your nervous system, those small morning choices will never feel small again. Now we arrive at the heart of this conversation. Literally. I am going to walk you through exactly what happens inside your body during those first minutes after waking. Not in abstract terms, not in the kind of vague language that leaves you more confused than before, but step by step, mechanism by mechanism, in the way I wish every primary care doctor had time to explain. Let us start with the brain, because that is where the morning transition begins. Deep inside your brain, in a tiny region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, you have what scientists call your master clock. This cluster of approximately 20,000 neurons controls your circadian rhythm. And hours before you wake up, it is already hard at work preparing your body for the day ahead. Around 4 or 5 in the morning, while you are still fast asleep, your master clock sends signals to your adrenal glands. These are small glands sitting on top of your kidneys, and those signals tell your adrenals to start releasing cortisol. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone, but that name is misleading. Cortisol is not bad. You cannot live without it. What matters is not whether cortisol is present, but when it is released and in what pattern. In a healthy circadian rhythm, cortisol begins rising slowly around 4 or 5 in the morning. It peaks around 8 or 9 in the morning, right when you are typically starting your day, and then it gradually declines throughout the day, reaching its lowest point around midnight when you are sleeping. This cortisol surge is what wakes you up. It is what gives you energy. It is what sharpens your focus. It is what prepares your body to face the demands of the day. But here is where the hidden mechanism becomes critical. Cortisol does not work alone. When your adrenal glands release cortisol, they also release another hormone called epinephrine. You probably know epinephrine by its other name, adrenaline. And adrenaline has powerful effects on your cardiovascular system. Adrenaline makes your heart beat faster and harder. It increases the force of each contraction. It narrows your blood vessels, a process called vasoconstriction. And it makes your blood more likely to clot by increasing the stickiness of your platelets. All of this is normal. All of this is designed to help you wake up and function. Your body is not doing anything wrong. It is doing exactly what evolution programmed it to do. But here is what most people do not understand. This natural morning surge in cortisol and adrenaline is happening on top of whatever else you are doing. If you wake up slowly and calmly, the surge is manageable. If you wake up abruptly and add stress on top of it, the surge becomes more intense. Now let me introduce the second major player in this morning mechanism, your autonomic nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system has two branches, the sympathetic nervous system, which is often called fight or flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is often called rest and digest. During sleep, your parasympathetic nervous system is dominant. Your heart rate is slow. Your blood pressure is low. Your digestion is active. Your body is repairing and restoring. As morning approaches, your sympathetic nervous system begins to take over. Your fight or flight system activates. Your heart rate increases. Your blood pressure rises. Your blood vessels constrict. Your body prepares for action. This shift from parasympathetic to sympathetic dominance is supposed to happen gradually, over 30 to 60 minutes. But here's the problem that I see in so many of my patients. When you wake up to a loud alarm, when you sit up quickly, when you stand up immediately, when you check your phone and see emails or news that stress you out, you are essentially slamming your sympathetic nervous system into high gear. You are bypassing the gradual transition and forcing your body into fight or flight mode within seconds. And your cardiovascular system feels that shift immediately. Let me give you the numbers so you can see what I am talking about. In a calm, gradual awakening, your heart rate might increase from around 55 beats per minute during sleep to around 70 beats per minute after waking. A gentle increase of 15 beats per minute over 30 minutes. But in an abrupt, rushed awakening, that same heart rate can jump from 55 to 90 beats per minute in less than 60 seconds. That is a 35 beat per minute increase. nearly 2.5 times the normal rise, and it happens so fast that your heart has no time to adapt. Your blood pressure tells a similar story. A calm morning transition might see your systolic blood pressure, that is the top number, rise from 110 to 125 over 30 minutes. But an abrupt awakening can cause that same number to jump from 110 to 150 or higher within minutes. Now, let me add the third piece of this hidden mechanism, the one that surprises most people. Your blood viscosity changes in the morning. Viscosity is a measure of how thick your blood is, how easily it flows. And overnight, while you have been sleeping and not drinking fluids, your body becomes slightly dehydrated. Your blood becomes more concentrated, more viscous, thicker. Studies have shown that blood viscosity is approximately 20% higher in the early morning hours compared to the late afternoon. 20%. That is significant. Thicker blood flows less easily through your arteries. It puts more strain on your heart, and it is more likely to form clots. Now combine these three mechanisms: the cortisol and adrenaline surge, the shift from parasympathetic to sympathetic dominance, the increased blood viscosity from overnight dehydration. Your body in the early morning is already at a physiological disadvantage. Your heart is working harder, your blood vessels are narrower, your blood is thicker, your nervous system is primed for action. And then you add your morning habits on top of this already vulnerable state. You sit up quickly, which causes a temporary drop in blood pressure, followed by a compensatory surge. You stand up immediately, adding another surge. You drink cold water, which causes further vasoconstriction. You take medications that may not be timed correctly for your morning surge. You drink coffee, which adds more vasoconstriction and increases your heart rate further. You rush around, flooding your system with even more stress hormones. By the time you have been awake for 30 minutes, you have stacked multiple stressors on top of a body that was already in a vulnerable transition, and your cardiovascular system is now under significant strain. This is not theoretical. This is not speculation. This is basic physiology that has been measured in research studies for decades. And it explains why the risk of heart attack is highest in the morning. It explains why strokes are more common in the early hours. It explains why sudden cardiac death peaks between 6 and 10 in the morning. But here is what I want you to understand. And this is the most important part of this entire conversation. Your body is not broken. Your body is not failing you. Your body is doing exactly what it evolved to do. The problem is not your physiology. The problem is that modern life has taught you to ignore your physiology, to rush through transitions, to demand instant performance from a system that needs time to warm up. Think about how you would treat any other complex machine. If you had a high-performance engine, you would not start it and immediately rev it to maximum speed. You would let it idle. You would let the oil circulate. You would let the temperature come up gradually. You would give it time. Your body is infinitely more complex than any engine, and yet most people treat their morning transition with less care than they treat their car on a cold winter day. The patient I mentioned earlier, Richard, was not doing anything dramatically wrong. He was simply ignoring his body's need for a gradual transition, and his body was responding exactly as any human body would respond, with surges, with strain, with subtle warning signs that he had learned to ignore. Once he understood the mechanism, everything changed. Not because he became afraid of his morning, but because he finally understood why his body was sending those signals. He stopped fighting his physiology and started working with it. In the next part, I am going to share 3 key insights that most people miss about their morning health. 3 insights that go beyond the basic advice you have heard before. 3 insights that could change how you think about your first hour of every single day. But before we get there, I want you to pause for a moment and simply notice. Notice how your body feels in the morning. Notice the transition. Notice the subtle signals you have been ignoring. Because awareness is the first step. And once you see the mechanism, you cannot unsee it. We have covered a lot of ground together. The hidden morning transition, the natural surge of cortisol and adrenaline, the shift in your nervous system, the increased blood viscosity, the stacking of small stressors that most people never connect to their heart health. Now I want to share 3 key insights that most people miss. Even people who are generally health conscious, even people who read articles about longevity and watch videos about preventive medicine, even people who think they already understand what I have explained so far. These 3 insights are not complicated, but they are almost never discussed in routine medical appointments, and they have the power to change how you approach every single morning for the rest of your life. Let me start with the first insight, and I want you to lean in here because this one surprises almost everyone I tell. Insight 1. The timing of your blood pressure medication matters more than the dose. Most people assume that taking their blood pressure medication in the morning is the right choice. After all, you wake up, you take your pill, you go about your day. It seems logical, it seems responsible, and for many people, it is perfectly fine. But here is what the research has shown, and what most primary care doctors do not have time to discuss in a 15-minute appointment. Your natural morning blood pressure surge happens between approximately 6 and 10 in the morning. If you take your blood pressure medication when you wake up, it typically takes 30 to 60 minutes to reach effective levels in your bloodstream, which means your medication is not working during the exact period when your blood pressure is naturally peaking. You are essentially missing your own most vulnerable window. Now consider what happens if you take that same medication at night instead, before bed. By the time morning arrives, the medication is already at full strength in your system. It is actively working during those critical early morning hours when your blood pressure surge would otherwise put strain on your heart and blood vessels. This is not speculation. Large clinical trials have studied exactly this question. The Hygeia chronotherapy trial, which followed more than 19,000 patients over more than 6 years, found that taking blood pressure medication at bedtime, rather than in the morning, significantly reduced the risk of cardiovascular events, heart attacks, strokes, the need for revascularization procedures. The reduction was not small, it was substantial. And yet, most people taking blood pressure medication have never even discussed this option with their doctor. Now let me be very clear about something. I am not telling you to change the timing of your medication based on this video. Different medications work differently. Different patients have different patterns. Some blood pressure medications are diuretics, and taking them at night might disrupt your sleep with frequent trips to the bathroom. Some people have what is called non-dipping blood pressure, where their nighttime pressure does not drop normally, and the timing considerations are different. What I am telling you is that this is a conversation worth having with your doctor. A conversation about chronotherapy, about aligning your medication timing with your body's natural rhythms, about optimizing when you take your medication, not just what medication you take. Because most patients never ask this question, and most doctors, through no fault of their own, do not have the time to raise it. So the insight remains hidden, and people continue taking their medication at a time that may be less effective than an alternative. That is the first insight. Now let me share the second one. This one is about hydration, but not in the way you have heard before. Insight 2. The temperature of your morning water affects your blood vessels. You have heard that drinking water in the morning is healthy, and that is true. After 6 to 8 hours of sleep, your body is relatively dehydrated. Your blood volume is slightly lower. Your blood viscosity is higher. Drinking water in the morning helps restore your blood volume and reduces that dangerous thickness I mentioned earlier. But here is what almost no one talks about. The temperature of that water matters. When you drink cold water, your body responds by constricting the blood vessels in your digestive tract and in your peripheral circulation. This is a protective reflex. Your body is trying to preserve heat by reducing blood flow to your skin and extremities. But that vasoconstriction also increases your blood pressure, sometimes significantly. Studies have shown that drinking cold water can increase blood pressure by 10 to 15 millimeters of mercury in some individuals, particularly in older adults and in people with already elevated blood pressure. Now contrast that with room temperature or warm water. Warm water does not trigger the same vasoconstrictive reflex. It is gentler on your cardiovascular system. It allows hydration without the added stress of vascular constriction. And here is where the stacking effect becomes critical again. Remember, your blood pressure is already rising naturally in the morning. Your blood vessels are already somewhat constricted from your morning sympathetic surge. Adding cold water on top of that is another stressor, another layer, another small push in the wrong direction. Individually, cold water is not dangerous, but combined with everything else happening in your body during those first 30 minutes, it becomes part of a pattern of stacking stressors that your cardiovascular system has to manage. This is why I suggest to my patients that they drink room temperature or warm water in the morning. Not ice water, not cold water from the refrigerator. Water that is gentle. Water that hydrates without constricting. Water that works with their morning physiology rather than against it. Some of my patients have taken this simple change and noticed an immediate difference. Less chest heaviness, less sense of their heart pounding in the early morning. A smoother, calmer transition into the day. And here is something else worth considering. In many traditional medical systems, including Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, warm water in the morning has been recommended for thousands of years. Not because those ancient practitioners understood blood viscosity and vasoconstriction in the way we do today, but because they observed patterns. They noticed that people who drank warm water in the morning seem to have better health outcomes. And now, modern physiology is catching up to explain why. That is the second insight. Now let me share the third one, and this might be the most important of all. Insight 3. Your morning alarm might be harming your heart. This sounds dramatic, I know. But let me explain what I mean, because the mechanism here is both fascinating and deeply practical. When you are sleeping, your body is in a parasympathetic state. Rest and digest. Your heart rate is slow, your blood pressure is low, your nervous system is calm. When your alarm goes off, particularly if it is a loud, jarring, sudden sound, you experience something called an alarm-induced stress response. Your body perceives this sudden intrusion as a threat. Your sympathetic nervous system activates instantly. Your adrenal glands release a burst of cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate jumps. Your blood pressure surges, all within seconds. Now compare that to waking up naturally, without an alarm. When you wake up naturally, your body has already begun the transition from sleep to wakefulness. Your cortisol has been rising gradually. Your heart rate has been increasing slowly. Your nervous system has been shifting from parasympathetic to sympathetic dominance over a period of 30 to 60 minutes. By the time you open your eyes, your body is already prepared. The transition has already happened. You are not being jerked from one state to another. You are arriving at wakefulness gradually, gently, on your body's own terms. This difference is not small. Research using ambulatory monitoring has shown that alarm-induced awakening causes a much sharper spike in heart rate and blood pressure compared to natural awakening. In some studies, the difference is 20 to 30% higher for alarm awakenings. Now here is the practical reality. Most of us cannot simply eliminate alarms. We have schedules, we have responsibilities, we have places to be. Telling people to just wake up naturally is not helpful advice for someone who needs to be at work by 8 in the morning. But there are modifications that can make a significant difference. Gentle alarms. Alarms that start with soft sounds and gradually increase in volume. Alarms that use light instead of sound. Sunrise simulation alarms that gradually brighten your room over 30 minutes before your wake-up time. Even vibrating alarms that gently rouse you without the sudden auditory startle. These are not luxury items. They are tools for working with your physiology rather than against it. And for people who are already at higher cardiovascular risk, for people over 60, for people with known high blood pressure or heart disease, These modifications can be genuinely protective. I have had patients tell me that switching to a gentle alarm was the single most impactful change they made. Not medication adjustments, not dietary changes, just waking up more gently. And their morning blood pressure readings improved significantly within weeks. So let me summarize these 3 insights because they build on each other in an important way. First, consider the timing of your blood pressure medication. Taking it at night rather than in the morning might better protect you during your natural morning surge. Have this conversation with your doctor. Second, pay attention to the temperature of your morning water. Room temperature or warm water hydrates without triggering the vasoconstriction that cold water causes. A simple change with meaningful effects. Third, examine how you wake up. Sudden, jarring alarms trigger a stress response that adds to your natural morning surge. Gentle alarms or light-based alarms allow your body to transition more gradually. None of these insights require expensive treatments or dramatic lifestyle overhauls. They are not about adding more to your routine. They are about adjusting what you already do. Small changes in timing, temperature, and transition. But here is what makes them powerful. They work with your body's natural physiology instead of against it. They reduce the stacking effect rather than adding to it. They help your cardiovascular system do its job without unnecessary strain. In the final part of this video, I am going to bring everything together. I am going to show you how to apply these insights in a practical, sustainable way. Not a rigid protocol that you will abandon after a week, but a calm, reflective approach to your morning that you can maintain for the rest of your life. Because the goal is not to make you afraid of your morning. The goal is to help you understand your morning well enough to protect yourself without anxiety. And that is exactly where we are going next. We have covered a remarkable amount of ground together. From the quiet biology of your morning transition to the stacking of small stressors that most people never notice. From a patient named Richard, whose morning chest heaviness disappeared with simple changes, to the 3 hidden insights about medication timing, water temperature, and the way you wake up. Now it is time to bring everything together. Not with a list of rigid rules that will feel overwhelming. Not with fear-based warnings that make you anxious about something as basic as opening your eyes. But with calm reflection, with practical clarity, with the kind of understanding that allows you to make better choices without constantly worrying about whether you are doing everything right. Let me start with the most important thing I want you to take away from this entire conversation. Your body is not your enemy. Your morning physiology is not a design flaw. The surge of cortisol and adrenaline that happens as you wake up is not your body trying to hurt you. It is your body trying to prepare you, to protect you, to give you the energy and alertness you need to face the demands of the day. The problem has never been your body. The problem is that modern life has taught you to ignore your body's signals, to rush through transitions, to demand instant performance from a system that evolved over millions of years to wake up slowly, gradually, with the rising sun and the natural light of morning. Think about how different your morning would look if you worked with your body instead of against it. Not because you are trying to follow a perfect protocol, but because you understand what is happening inside you, and you want to support that process rather than fight it. Let me paint that picture for you. Imagine waking up not to a jarring alarm that shocks your nervous system, but to a gentle light that slowly brightens your room over 30 minutes. Your body has already begun its natural transition. Your cortisol has been rising gradually. Your heart rate has been increasing slowly. By the time you open your eyes, you are already prepared for wakefulness. You do not sit up immediately. Instead, you lie quietly for a moment. You feel your breath. You notice your body. You give your nervous system time to complete its shift from parasympathetic to sympathetic dominance. This takes less than 2 minutes, but those 2 minutes change everything. When you do sit up, you do it slowly. You sit on the edge of the bed for another minute or 2. You let your blood pressure stabilize. You let your body adjust to the change in position before you ask it to do anything else. You drink water, but it is room temperature or warm, gentle, hydrating without triggering the vasoconstriction that cold water causes. You feel the water moving through you, restoring the fluid balance that was lost during sleep, thinning your blood so it flows more easily through your arteries. You take your medications, but you have had the conversation with your doctor about timing. Perhaps you are taking them at night now, so they are at full strength during your morning surge. Perhaps you have found a different schedule that works better with your unique physiology. You delay your coffee for at least an hour. You eat something small first. You let your body complete its natural transition before you add caffeine to the equation. And when you do have your coffee, you drink it slowly, mindfully, not as a frantic fuel injection, but as a gentle nudge toward full alertness. None of this is complicated. None of this requires expensive equipment or dramatic lifestyle changes. But the cumulative effect on your cardiovascular system is profound. Instead of stacking stressors on top of an already vulnerable transition, you are supporting that transition. Instead of asking your heart to go from 0 to 60 in seconds, you are giving it time to warm up. Instead of fighting your physiology, you are working with it. And here is what I have learned from decades of practicing cardiology. The people who age well, the people who maintain their health into their 70s, 80s, and beyond, are not the people who follow every health rule perfectly. They are the people who understand their own bodies well enough to know what matters. They are the people who pay attention to patterns. They are the people who make small, sustainable adjustments rather than dramatic, short-lived changes. This is why I have focused so much on understanding rather than on rules. Because understanding lasts. Understanding allows you to adapt. Understanding gives you the confidence to make your own decisions, rather than blindly following advice that may not apply to your specific situation. Let me leave you with 3 simple reflections that you can carry into tomorrow morning and every morning after that. First, pay attention to your transition. Notice how you feel in those first few minutes after waking. Notice if you are rushing. Notice if you are stacking stressors. Simply noticing, without judgment, is the first step toward change. You cannot adjust what you do not see. Second, remember that small changes compound. You do not need to overhaul your entire morning routine overnight. Pick one thing. Maybe it is sitting up more slowly. Maybe it is switching to room temperature water. Maybe it is changing your alarm to something gentler. Make that one change for a week. Notice how it feels. Then add another. The cumulative effect of many small changes is greater than any single dramatic intervention. Third, and this is the most important reflection of all, be kind to yourself. You have been doing your morning routine the way you do it for years, perhaps decades. You learned it from your parents. You reinforced it through thousands of repetitions. It is automatic. It is unconscious. It is not a moral failing that you have been rushing through your mornings. It is simply a pattern that you now have the opportunity to understand and adjust. There is no shame in not knowing something that no one ever taught you. There is no failure in having habits that were formed before you understood their effects. The only question that matters now is what you do with the information you have gained. Will you go back to your old morning routine, knowing what you now know? Perhaps. Old habits are deeply ingrained. But I suspect that once you see the mechanism, once you understand what is happening inside your body during those first critical minutes, you will not be able to unsee it. And that awareness will quietly, gently, guide you toward better choices. Let me close with a final thought about that patient I mentioned at the beginning. The 62-year-old woman who was doing everything right and still ended up in the emergency department with a heart attack. She recovered. She made changes. She started waking up more slowly. She changed the timing of her medications. She stopped drinking cold water in the morning. She delayed her coffee by an hour. And within months, she felt better than she had in years. Not because she was doing anything dramatically different, but because she finally understood what her body had been trying to tell her every single morning. When I saw her for her 6-month follow-up, she said something that has stayed with me. She said, I spent 62 years fighting my mornings. Now I finally know how to let my mornings work for me. That is what this is about. Not fear, not restriction, not adding more rules to an already overscheduled life. It is about understanding. It is about awareness. It is about working with the body you have in the life you live to protect your health without sacrificing your peace of mind. You do not need to be perfect tomorrow morning. You do not need to change everything at once. You simply need to remember what you have learned here. Your body is doing its best to protect you, and with a little understanding, a little patience, and a few small adjustments, you can help it do that job for decades to come. Thank you for spending this time with me. I am Dr. Narges, and this is Healthwise. Take care of yourself, not with fear, with understanding, and I will see you in the next video.